I want to explain what the current process is from in basic terms so everybody can understand it. Not in me and you could probably talk legal jargon and hearings and all that, but from start to finish. So I get arrested anywhere in Montana on a felony. What's the process that I'm supposed to go through, and what rights am I afforded during that process until I'm either sentenced or adjudicated or complete? And then where does that citizen's jury fall in, and where should it fall in? And what have we done in its stead, and what are we doing now in its stead? Because the 1971, 72 Constitution changed the way citizen juries work.
The citizen's grand jury can only be empaneled at the discretion and order of a district court judge. And the citizen's grand jury belongs to the people, not the judiciary. And so if I am charged with a felony or capital crime, whatever it's called in your state, I have a right to a citizen's grand jury according to the U.S. Constitution.
Well, actually, it's not in the Constitution. It's actually in the Bill of Rights in Article 5.
Yes.
So, yeah. And because of that, Justice Antonin Scalia says that the grand jury is a fixture in its own right, and it doesn't belong to any of the other three branches of government. But yet here we have our judiciary in the state of Montana as well controlling our grand jury. So we even filed.
Welcome to Common Sense and Consequences, where we sit down with Montanans from every walk of life to talk honestly about what's happening in our communities, at our capital, and in our daily lives.
I'm John Looney. I'm going to be your host at Red Quill Media today. I have with me Bart Crabtree and Barb Calahan. And Bart, I'll start with you. I'll let you introduce yourself. Tell me who you are, what you're part of, and tell me why we're going to have this conversation today.
Well, lots of reasons. My name is Bart Crabtree. I'm with the Montana Citizens Council on Judicial Accountability. We founded that organization back in, I believe it was 2019, in response to a lot of abuses that we have seen going on in our court systems. There seems to be, not seems to be, but there is quite a bit of corruption in our court systems that need to be addressed. A lot of perjury goes on, violations of ethical standards by judges. And I'm not saying every judge is like that, but we do have some that are like that. And it's pretty difficult when you see the good judges turning a blind eye to this. So, but we've also been pushing in the legislature a number of bills, including in 2021, we brought the Conviction Integrity Unit. The state of Montana is actually one of the highest rated states in wrongful convictions, second only to Chicago, Illinois. And that's a result of our courts not being open and honest with a number of defendants. The data that we have is that as many as 10% of people that are convicted of serious crimes are factually innocent. And that's why we are bringing the Conviction Integrity Unit. We also brought some bills like regarding the Judicial Standards Commission. A lot of people know that they have a very high percentage rate of dismissing complaints against judges. And a lot of those complaints are people that are not happy with the judge's decisions or rulings. We get that. But there are quite a few very serious allegations against judges that are just swept under the rug. So we brought that. And also after the 2021 session, we started focusing on the state grand jury. The grand jury is a child of we the people, and we're trying to get that back in the hands of the citizens of Montana where it belongs. So,
Barb, how do you fit into this?
Well, I met Bart back in 2020, I believe it was, and I just due to my first and only experience with our judicial system here in Montana, I had some personal experience, and so I met Bart, and he through Facebook actually, and I went to one of their board meetings, and then from that point on, Bart asked me to join the board, and so I've been helping with learning a lot in our legislative process and how all of that works. I've done a lot of constitutional study and a lot of what truly the way our government is truly supposed to function, and so that's kind of where I'm at today. And education is a huge piece of that, and I love educating people. So
Good. So you're going to educate me today on some of the pieces that I'm missing.
We will do our best.
All right. So let's talk about grand juries. And before we get into what a grand jury is and where it falls in, what is the current process? And we talked a little bit before about what's the current process for somebody that is arrested, has to go to court, goes through the system, and is either the case is adjudicated, or they're either found innocent or guilty. What is the current climate or current process in Montana? Either or.
How about win at all cost?
I mean, think about layman.
Yes.
If I have no idea what a defendant goes through. So I get picked up for a felony tomorrow. What should I expect as a Montana citizen? What's going to happen?
Yeah, well, first of all, in Montana, and about half the states use exclusively a grand jury to indict somebody for a serious crime, meaning a felony. In Montana, but the other half of the states, like Montana, they use what's known as affidavit and motion for leave, where literally one police officer, sheriff's deputy, and one deputy county attorney can file a complaint with the district court to have somebody arrested for a serious crime. And that can really damage a person's reputation. Whereas with a grand jury, if we had to go through, like North Carolina, they have to use a grand jury to indict somebody. A grand jury is not like a jury in a trial in a courtroom. People have some misconceptions about that. All a grand jury does is investigates possible criminal activity by an individual or individuals. And if that grand jury, which in Montana is 11 people, and it takes 8 of those 11 to indict somebody, where they hand down what's called a true bill, which means there's enough evidence that they've investigated that there's a likelihood this person has committed this particular crime. We've always heard it referred to as probable cause. That's what the police and the courts use, okay? But back in, I think it was 1864, our SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, made an absolutely horrible ruling, which nobody has gone after since then, that said the Fifth Amendment to our United States Constitution, Article 5, which guarantees a person the right to a grand jury, the Supreme Court ruled that it does not apply to the states. Now, first of all, the Supreme Court had absolutely zero authority to do that. That is part of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. But yet nobody has challenged that over the last century and how many years. So actually, we're on the precipice of challenging that civilly, going to the Supreme Court here pretty soon. So here in Montana, once a person is arrested for a crime, then you go for an arraignment, and then the attorneys, they file papers back and forth, motions to dismiss or bringing in evidence and witnesses and all this stuff. And then, of course, they go to trial before a 12-member panel. Misdemeanors are 6 people on a jury, but felonies are 12. And that's where there's actually a trial in a courtroom that most people are used to hearing about. So we think so the grand jury can be used two ways. Number one, to indict somebody for criminal charges, but it can be used to investigate. Like if you believed somebody was committing a crime and the police or sheriff's deputies were turning a blind eye to it for whatever reason, you or I should be able to impanel a grand jury to investigate that, which would basically override the judicial system in Montana to investigate that. And that way you and I as people, citizens of Montana, would be able to actually bring charges against somebody. So
Is there a mechanism right now? So in my line of business, I deal with defendants day in and day out. To my understanding, you get charged, you have to go before the nearest available judge. On felony charges, it's usually a justice of the peace. You have an initial hearing where that justice is required to tell you what you're charged with, what penalties you could face, read you your rights, and advise you and take an initial plea. He sets a bond. The next step is where it gets cloudy, because your next step should be an evidentiary hearing. Is there actually enough evidence to continue with this case, where the judge or your attorney or you could present whatever facts you have, and the prosecutor is required to present enough facts to say there's enough evidence here to continue with this case. The case then gets moved up to a district court where you have an arraignment, where again, you read your rights, you read your charges, what penalties you can face, and you put in your initial plea. And then it carries on. My understanding is that grand jury is the stop between justice court and actually going to district court. And the reason I want to make that clear is because it seems to me that none of that is happening right now. Right. Not even the evidentiary hearings.
Exactly.
So when you're charged with something, the prosecutor, arresting officer, can put whatever charges they want on there, and you could end up in front of a district court judge being read a list of charges that nobody has actually seen any evidence on yet.
Right.
So from that, where does the grand jury, or where should that grand jury fall back in?
That's correct. I mean, they should have an evidentiary hearing, but like you say, that rarely happens. But according to Article 5 or the Fifth Amendment to our Constitution, the citizens' right, a guarantee to a grand jury, you should be able, when you go into district court or the justice court, being charged with something, you should be able to tell that judge, I demand a grand jury investigate this, rather than these charges that were brought by one police officer or one deputy county attorney, for example. Okay. And at that point, that judge should order a grand jury impanel because we have that right. But here in Montana, in our 1972 Constitution, this is where our judiciary is hijacked our people's right to a grand jury. In Montana, the only way we can impanel a grand jury is at the discretion of a district court judge. They've taken all that authority away from we the people, and what we're doing is trying to restore that to where it belongs with we the people. So we feel that, like in cases with a lot of these wrongful convictions in Montana, if a grand jury reviewed these initial charges, they would probably be thrown out. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. There are serious consequences in being charged with these serious crimes, as you well know.
So I'm a defendant. I'm arrested on something. I go in front of a judge. What is my course of action? Because we can still, according to the Constitution, according to the Montana State Constitution, or the Montana State Constitution, I can still request it. Has anybody requested one? And what's happened when we've requested one? Has there been one since 1972? Have we had a grand jury?
Actually, there was one. When we started pushing this about 3-4 years ago, our board sent out a questionnaire to all the clerks of district court around Montana. And it was very simple and short, like 3 or 4 questions. And basically like, do you have a grand jury impaneled right now? When was the last time your district had a grand jury impaneled? And a couple other questions. And initially, we only got a response from maybe 10 of them. So I sent out another email, and then a third one. They finally figured out that, hey, we better answer this, or this guy's going to keep bugging us, you know. So, but anyway, we ended up getting about a 45% response rate, as I recall. And the last time that there was a grand jury impaneled was, well, now it's probably about 38 years ago. And it's because nobody even thinks about the grand jury. I mean, it's literally been taken away from us that it's almost like faded in history, but we're trying to bring that back because it does belong to you and I.
So how are we trying to bring this back? What is it that you're doing? What actions are we taking to try and educate people or bring this back into common use?
So initially, when I first joined the board, we did community forums throughout the state, and we traveled and did a lot of forums trying to just educate people. There's a couple great resources that I think I've mentioned, and I mention these every time because it's puts it in layman's terms, as you mentioned before. But there's the Patriot Academy puts out something called Constitution Alive. You can go to YouTube. You can look up Constitution Alive. There's 13 videos. And Rick Green and David Barton from Wall Builders, they go through the Constitution and there's some great content in there, and I can go through and find the specific video that the grand jury's actually explained for you if you want that. But that's just a great basic education where your 6th grader could understand. I mean, Rick Green has his kids in there helping with the teaching of it, and they do it at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. So it's a great resource. There's a second one called Biblical Citizenship that also kind of talks about the role of, like, if somebody's a believer, if you're and what your role is in government, because a lot of in our modern society, a lot of churches are hands off because they're afraid of losing their 501c3 or whatever their fear is, which I find interesting that churches are operating under fear. But so what we have done is first try to explain to people that that this is something that our government has taken from us that we need to get back, and then the second steps Bart has, even before I met him, he was bringing legislation, and every 2 years we're bringing back legislation, working on getting back the control that that has been usurped by our government, that belongs with we the people. And so we've done that through different pieces of legislation. And every year, it moves forward. It takes a long time to get something through, especially when our legislature only meets every 2 years. But it takes a while to get things accomplished. But we're making progress. We're also making progress in the education, where more people are understanding there's a problem in our a lot of people know that there's a problem because they either personally or know someone who has been railroaded by the system, but nobody has any idea. If you're under 30 years old or even under 40 years old in this country, you have a very limited understanding of how our country is supposed to function. And so they don't, they think there's nothing I can do, right? Because the psychological training that has taken place in our education system is that the government is in charge. They don't understand that, no, we the people are in charge, and the government has usurped our authority, and there's steps that we need to take through our legislative process to get that back. And so we have a long way to go, and that's why I think we're here today, and we're looking for more ways to truly explain to people that you're not wrong in that feeling that you have and that understanding that you have that something isn't right, because it's not right. And when you have the judiciary going around, when the legislative branch makes laws, that's the law. The judicial branch doesn't get to then decide that law isn't constitutional. If it's passed by the legislature, which is we the people, the elected officials closest to the people, so there's just a lot of different ways where there's just this judicial supremacy or illusion of it, or they try to make you believe that that's the way it should be, when we need to come back to the place where the people understand that those are public servants and that they work for us. And if there's something we want to change, we have the right to do that.
So,
Sorry.
no, you're fine. But that just fills my head with a bunch of questions. And I don't want to get off topic, but educating people. So let me play devil's advocate a little bit. I have several people that I help through the judiciary or help through the judicial system. And just today, one of them, their court had to be rescheduled because not enough jurors showed up. When I ran for office, the thing I did at front people's doors most often was a civics lesson on your part in government. How do we breach that gap? How do we get people to understand that if you don't take part in this or educate yourself, then you're going to lose the ability to exercise your rights?
Mm-hmm. We get back control of our school boards and our education system starting in kindergarten. That's where it starts. Civics is no longer taught in schools, and there's another organization. I know I keep plugging, but there's another organization called Tactical Civics, and Tactical Civics has done an excellent job. There's a great library of books that truly, like the one that's a very simple read. It's called Grand Jury Awake. And that book, that will give you the layman's terms of the grand jury, what it is, how it's supposed to function. But I bring them up because they have put together another book that's like junior high and high school level, that truly talks about and explains civics. And we have it at, there's a couple different private schools that I know, and then a lot of homeschoolers that have implemented that. But the answer to that question is, we have also, our education system has been hijacked, and we need to get that back.
So, Bart, the other thing Barb alluded to is the legislature makes the laws.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Once those are in the book, that's it. I have two questions on this. One, why are judges allowed to interpret law or interpret the intent of a law? And why would we have a legislator stand up and say, we don't need to write intent into the laws? What's your thoughts on that?
That's a very good question, and we hear this all the time, legislating from the bench. And we all know that there's an issue with bias in many of the judges. I'm not saying all of them, but there are some of them, and there's a big fight going on right now, as you know, between our legislature and the judiciary over this. A lot of us feel that any judge that is running for a bench seat needs to declare a party affiliation or close to it thereof, Republican, Independent, Green Party, Democrat, whatever. We get calls all the time, especially in the fall leading up to an election, asking us about judges that are in the primary and things like that. So actually our board is very seriously considering, like in August or September leading up to an election, to put out a list of the judges that are running for office and the history of that judge, because the public is really ignorant to that. I mean, I was that way 10 years ago. You know, the only thing I might know about a judge is by a friend that knows him or something like that. So, and then I wanted to touch one little thing too about the grand jury, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're talking about state grand jury here, not federal grand jury. In my opinion, of my study and learning and so much about grand juries in the last 4 years, the federal grand jury is just a total sham. Okay, the prosecutor controls it. The prosecutor only presents damning evidence against somebody that's a target of a grand jury. The prosecutors that are presenting this stuff to a grand jury will not allow those grand jury members to ask questions. I was given a presentation down in Missoula a couple of years ago on grand jury, and a gal came up to me afterwards and said she was on a grand jury there in Missoula. And see, the grand jury here at the federal level, they're always in session, okay? It's not like here in Montana, if we ever get one, it's a special grand jury that meets for 30 days or 3 months or whatever they need. But she indicated to me that she tried to ask questions of this prosecutor, and he said, you can't ask questions. You just have to listen to what we're providing you. And that's why you've always heard the term, it's easy to indict a ham sandwich. That's why. And when we finally get control of this grand jury, our state grand jury here in Montana, we intend on bringing quite a few bills for new statutes on how to control and how to run that grand jury, okay? Because in the county, when a grand jury is impaneled, that grand jury is supposed to be the pinnacle of law enforcement in that county, and the judge and the prosecutor, whoever answers to that grand jury. If they want to subpoena somebody or something, they have to have that right to do it. Like I said, we started pushing grand jury in 2023. Because it's in our Constitution, we had to bring a legislative referendum to get it on the ballot, okay? It didn't even make it out of the House Judiciary that year. That was two sessions ago, 2023, obviously. And so I wasn't really disappointed about that because I know most people are ignorant about grand jury. And when I say ignorant, I mean it in the classic sense. I don't mean stupid or anything like that, but they're just uneducated about it. So because that didn't even make it out of House Judiciary, we decided, okay, we're going to go to the second method to try to get this on the ballot, and that's a citizens initiative. So we organized that. We went to the Secretary of State. We got the authority to go after a citizens initiative. They went through the process with the Attorney General and everything. So we embarked on a citizens initiative across the state of Montana. But unfortunately, as you know, these initiatives take a lot of money and a lot of people, and we're understaffed and obviously way underfunded. I spent, I don't know, seven or 8 months traveling all over Montana. I mean, going to gun shows and everywhere we could think of, getting signatures, and we only got maybe a fourth of what we needed, okay? And then, of course, the press comes out, and they say, well, see, there's not that many people interested in a grand jury. They only got like a fourth of what they needed. Well, that was just a total distortion of the facts. So we brought another legislative referendum this last session in 25, as you're probably aware of. And it made it out of House Judiciary, and we actually got, I believe it was it 40 or 45 votes on the House floor for it. So even though it got defeated on the House floor in the second reading, I was really happy with that because to me it means the word is getting out. The education process is getting out, and these legislators are talking amongst each other about it now. So we're looking forward to continue pursuing it. It's been a lot of fun.
The process of a state grand jury. So I had asked earlier, where are you going to get the people? You're not calling people up. It's not like a district court hearing or a judiciary hearing where you're calling 20 people and then you're doing the
voir dire
and whittling that down to 6 or whittling it down to 12, and then those 12 people come off a list and then they call the next jury. This is a jury that is impaneled at the beginning of the month, and they sit and listen to every case that needs to go before them, or if it's requested, they listen to every case for that month, and then the people push what cases they want up to district court to go through the rest of the judicial process. Is that?
Yeah. If we want a grand jury, first, as it is right now, we have to petition for one. And like I said, we did file one of those in Cascade County fairly recently, and it was denied. And then we filed for a writ of mandamus with the Supreme Court, which was denied. And so now we're going to federal level. We're going to keep going. But a grand jury is impaneled the same way as a regular, they call it a pedijury, a 12-member in a regular jury trial, and it's done off the voter registration rolls, the driver's license. So once that grand jury is impaneled, they actually meet in secret, in private, and then those 11 jurors they call them, they meet over a period of time. It's not like they meet like a regular jury in a criminal trial where they meet every day until the trial's over. The jurors in a grand jury could meet one day, and then they wouldn't meet again for another week until they get the evidence that they subpoenaed, had the judge sign a subpoena for. They could end up investigating something over a period of 3 or 4 months, something like that, until those jurors feel they have enough evidence to either hand down an indictment or a no bill, which means we don't see anything here, you can't charge this person.
So common sense would say that would shrink our caseloads in district court.
Absolutely.
It would shrink the need for the crazy amount of public defenders that we have right now, because the citizens would be handling most of it. And then once they do the heavy lifting and they indict somebody or they say no, then our judiciary could move a lot faster and cases could get through the system faster. Am I reading that wrong, or?
Well, the grand jury would take more time, and of course there's a bit of an expense to it, and that's what the opponents of our grand jury think. And by the way, when people are opposed to grand jury, they're just simply saying, I don't want accountability. We say that, and that's so true. But so typically a grand jury does take more time. It is an expense, but people also have to look at the other side of the coin. How much does a jury trial cost? If somebody's in a trial for 2 days or 2 weeks or something like that. So the cost really offset, in my opinion, but there's no data on this to compare because we haven't had a grand jury in Montana in so long. So,
how does this conflict with speedy trial laws?
There's really no conflict because so if you think about an investigation, and let me just back up. Montana has no concept of speedy trials. So that's kind of a moot point if we're going to continue down the same old journey, right? But how would this help speed that up? Well, a couple of things. If you think about, like Bart alluded to, and you mentioned the number of prosecutors, the district court caseload, the number of public defenders that are way overloaded with cases, all of those things. Well, there's a couple, it's twofold, right? So the citizens grand jury, if the person being charged with a crime requests to their right to a grand jury, a citizens grand jury, that grand jury is kind of like the investigator. So right now we have our sheriff's department, we have our police department, we have the investigators. And the investigators, they decide, this is the evidence. They present it to the prosecutor. The prosecutor takes it from there. When they request a grand jury to review, the grand jury has all of the same subpoena power. They have all of the same ability to investigate. And they can call anybody in that they want to question, all of that. Part of that depends on the support of, say, the sheriff's department. So if I want to subpoena you because I have questions for you regarding this case, then let's say that you are refusing to show up. So now I need the sheriff's department to go bring you in, because it's the same as if you're subpoenaed in court. You're in contempt of court. It's the same kind of thing where, so it just depends on how, like where the evidence leads. But remember, we have a presumption of innocence until proven guilty, right? And this is the step where the citizens, and it's a protection for the people, but it's also to keep our elected officials, our sheriff's departments, our prosecutors. It's also a check and balance. That's why it's in the Bill of Rights. It's a check and balance to keep them honest and to protect the people from being charged with a crime that there's no evidence for. And a lot of people think, well, if you got convicted in a court of law, it must be true, right? But that's not the case today. And it's not just a Montana problem. It's a nationwide problem. But
I get that, and I think anybody that's dealt or been in the system or been adjacent to the system understands that. Two things. So as you've gone through this and you went out and you did the CI, what was the sheriff's responses? I mean, sheriff support across the state, are we getting that? Prosecutors support this, or is everybody opposed to it?
The prosecutors definitely not. They want total control. But, I never did talk to any of the sheriffs or sheriff's deputies across Montana other than one. And that was when I was down in Ravalli County at one of their gun shows gathering signatures. And it was David Castle, who used to be the sheriff up in Cascade County. And I hadn't seen him in 20 years, and he came through there, and we had a good visit, and he was all in favor of the grand jury. Why? Because he understands what the grand jury does. So, but in general, a lot of people in the judiciary are opposed to the grand jury, unfortunately. And a lot of that is because they don't understand what the grand jury can do. So,
volunteers, what do you guys need for help, and how do people reach out to you? How do we get more people involved in this?
They can go to our website at mtscoja.org, and that'll take them directly to our website. And there's an email link in there, info@mtscoja.org, and they can just send us an email.
If I may just add, there's a couple other things too. If you're a pastor of a church, or if there's schools that want to have Civic Day, and they want to invite us to come in and just do a short presentation on civics and citizens grand jury, we would love to be able to do that. We do have, our board is spread kind of centrally in the state of Montana, but we do have, if we have some people in Billings who want to get some people together and they want to have a conversation, just reach out, because we are definitely looking at doing more things like this to try to help get the word out, but also sitting around a coffee table, having your church group get together. If you have a small group and you want us to come talk about that. And to back up to something else that you mentioned, John, you talked about people that, really aren't familiar with the way the judiciary is function or how it has gone off course. I was one of those ignorant people, as Bart called it. I was born and raised Amish. The Amish don't really get a whole lot into politics or government, or we try to stay away from the courthouse unless we need a permit or something. But what I'm saying is that even though I had a great education as far as the way that our government is supposed to function, the Amish are kind of a culture all on their own. And so until my family was affected by it personally, I didn't really pay attention. I was raising kids and trying to survive and make a living and take care of our family and our home. And so I didn't really pay attention. And I think that's what's happened to our country when we're looking at the country in general. And I know I'm going off on a big old rabbit trail.
That's all right.
But I think that
It gave me time to remember, because I had two questions after your when you were talking about the district court cases. Right now, and I know this probably leads into a future discussion with the conviction integrity units, but seems to me that without the protection of either an evidentiary hearing or without the protection of a grand jury, a prosecutor right now can put 17 felony charges at you. Let's just put as many charges as we can. We're going to throw those against the wall, and whatever sticks. And then at the end of it, you're going to plea because it's just so overwhelming. I've been in a position where you can get overwhelmed by what's going on in court. If you're being sued or you're suing somebody or you're being charged with something, this gives the citizens that protection.
And the judicial system, the judges and the prosecutors especially, they don't like that, because that means we get to hold them accountable, and they've forgotten that they work for us, and that's their oath that they take. The only problem is we have this thing called the bar, and so their allegiance is misplaced, and that's another piece of the education that we need to get people educated about.
Yeah, and that's what the grand jury is also known as, several things. The People's Panel. And it's also known, and I use this quite a bit, the people's sword and shield. The sword is indicative that we can use it against a corrupt government, no matter it's an agency or a branch of government, whatever. The shield of the sword and shield is, as Barbara just said, is to protect innocent citizens from overzealous prosecutors. And as you said, prosecutors all the time, they'll charge somebody with a crime through a single report by, say, a single police officer, which likely could be false. I mean, when they file those reports, they don't even have to sign an affidavit stating that they swear that what's in their report is true. So they can file this report with the county attorney's office, who then just like almost randomly throws other charges, like you said, to stick on the wall, just so they can use those charges, even though they're false, to get them to plea bargain into pleading guilty to the original charge. This is the game they play. And a lot of people don't understand this out there, okay? I know you do. You understand how it works. And if a grand jury, say that happened to you. You were charged with something, and then they threw a bunch of other charges in there, let it stick, and then you demanded, I want my Fifth Amendment right to a grand jury. Say that they allowed you to do that and went to a grand jury. What do you think the grand jury is going to do when they look at all these other charges, when they're not even based on anything? They're going to throw them all out.
No facts or evidence.
No facts or evidence. So that's why the grand jury is so important to this.
How do we get it back? I know we keep running bills and we're going to run CIs, but how do we get the grand jury back, and what is the biggest opposition to getting that back?
Yeah, I love that question. That's really good. It is. First of all, we got to keep doing what we're doing. We've been pecking away at this for 4 years now. We're not going to quit. We're going to keep going. We're getting more and more and more support. It's starting to snowball now. So this would be a bad time to quit now, obviously, when we're getting so much support and people are learning what it's about. Secondly, as I brought up, recently we filed that petition in the 8th Judicial District Court for a grand jury on that certain issue going on over there. It was denied. And then it was denied at the Supreme Court for the writ of mandamus. A writ of mandamus is simply, okay, Supreme Court, this is what we did at the district court level. They denied us. We're asking you to send that writ of mandamus down to the district court level, mandating, that's where the word mandamus comes from, mandating that the district court impanel that grand jury. The Supreme Court denied that. So now our next step right now, what we're doing, is we are currently having a certain person out in North Carolina who's taken a great interest in this case. He's drafting the complaint to file in U.S. District Court here in Montana, and we're raising the funds for that right now. It's going to cost quite a bit. Unfortunately, that's the way it is, but we're going to be filing in U.S. District Court. We are going to push this issue all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, and we're going to ask the Supreme Court of the United States to overturn that ridiculous ruling in Hurtado v. California, in that like 1840 case I was telling you about, to have them reverse that and impose on all states that they have to use grand jury. It's just unconscionable that Supreme Court back then thought that they could take away our constitutional right through the Article 5 to a grand jury, and that some of the states here in our republic allowed that to happen, like they did here in Montana. So that's how our grand jury system has been hijacked, and we're bent on bringing this back. So
the other piece to that is the conviction integrity unit, and Ohio, North Carolina already has one of these things, and that's after the fact. Somebody's been convicted and they're still proclaiming innocence. The conviction integrity unit is another one of those panels that can look at cases and review cases and find those things, and that's another piece of accountability, and that's why you have the Montana Judges Association. You have all of these different associations, the attorney, prosecutors. You have all of them. When you go listen to some of the testimony, it's so blatantly false. If you know anything at all about the Constitution and the way that our country is supposed to function. But until the people understand that, and the people understand that that they have the power, that we have the power, we the people have been given all of the power to run our government the way that we see fit. And until people understand that and get back to their civic duty, their own civic government by we the people only functions and only works if we the people are engaged and actually doing our civic duty and taking part in it. And I know everybody's off living and chasing the American dream, and everybody's busy, but you know what? That's how countries lose their freedom. And we have a duty. Just like if you put on the uniform as a police officer, you take an oath. If you put on the uniform as for the military, you take an oath. It's your duty to fulfill. We the people, we as citizens, we also have a duty to fulfill. We have to get people back to doing that, and it starts with education. In my opinion.
So I think one of you had mentioned self-preservation tour.
The judicial self-preservation tour that's just happened. The judiciary and their self-preservation.
Is that what it's called?
We're back to the future.
I don't want to get off of grand jury. I know we want to have the discussion about grand juries, but it all leads to the same answers or the same questions. How do we get more people involved? How do we take control of our government back? How do we make people understand that you're living your life, you're out doing your own thing, and you don't need my services. You don't need to worry about the judiciary because you're a law-abiding citizen. You're paying your taxes, you're doing everything right until something happens. And then you're in the system, and now you are blind to what's coming next. So how do we impress on people the importance of just looking around and engaging your neighbors, engaging your community, and saying, I need to get involved. I mean, we have citizen advisory committees all over the place that do all sorts of things. How do we get people involved in the judiciary?
Well, like right now, I mean, what you're doing here with Red Quill Media, this is great. We're getting the information out. There's other outlets that we have been working with across the state of Montana. I've even been on the Ag Network down there in Billings with Tom Schultz, Jim White up in Kalispell, Northwest Liberty News, and they've become good friends of mine, and we're just getting the word out. And it's so important. So, but getting back to the self-preservation, I think you were referring to the forums that the Corey Swanson was having and everything.
I don't know anything about this. I think maybe you were telling me about it or mentioned it.
Yes, that's what he's referring to.
Okay, well, what happened about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there's a new organization out there called Friends of the Third Branch. It's an organization, I believe, based out of Missoula. I'm not positive, but it's made up mostly of attorneys, okay, friends of the court, okay. And they ended up supposedly hosting a forum at the University of Montana that Corey Swanson attended. And they were claiming that the legislature is, and I'm not paraphrasing here, I'm quoting this, that the legislature is attacking the judiciary. The legislature is taking aim at the judiciary. This is just propaganda and just false rhetoric, you know. And then they also said that Corey Swanson said there's already been damage to the courts. Where does that come from? All the bills that not only us but others have brought, like the Special Senate Select Committee in the last session, they brought like 25 bills. These are bills that we, the people, citizens of Montana, are concerned about with our judiciary because a lot of people do see what's going on here. We have that right to bring these bills, and we're going to continue to bring them. So in response to this forum, in my opinion, what they're doing is they're already politicking for 2027. They know there's going to be more bills coming, and they're trying to get ahead of the curve. Now, we're coming out with a press release in the next day or two. We've been working on it for 3 or 4 days to retort to this thing. There's been articles written and posted out there, like on social media by the Independent Record and some other journalists, I guess, if that's the right term to use. But it's a total fallacy. We, the people, are sovereign. The servants in our judiciary are our servants. The people are the masters. We have the right to be bringing these bills. And in my opinion, I think it's just the judiciary crying because we're stepping on authority that they've overstepped their boundary. I know that's what it is. So we're excited to go head-to-head with them on this, and we want to educate the public on what the truth is about this. A good one, for an example, is the Judicial Standards Commission. We brought a bill, at that time it was Brad Cheetah out of Missoula. He was a representative. He brought a bill for us. We were going to try to abolish that Judicial Standards Commission and bring in a Citizens Oversight Commission. That met with a lot of blowback. And as a matter of fact, you may remember the email scandal of the Supreme Court, all those emails that came out, really blasting that bill. It was that bill and then the one that Gianforte had brought. I can't remember which one that was, but that is really what got mixed up in that email scandal. And a lot of those judges made some horrible comments about we the people bringing these bills and testifying. I mean, it was just totally uncalled for. So I think we have them backpedaling right now, and they need to stay in their own lane. They need to understand where their authority ends. They need to understand that our legislators, and you know who they are, all our legislators have the pulse of all Montanans. We, the people, go to our representatives. They're the ones that bring the bill on behalf of the people of Montana. And the judiciary seems to have lost sight of that.
I think people need to start asking questions. If you see something in print, that doesn't make it fact. Today, unfortunately, that doesn't make it fact. Start asking questions. Start asking questions of your, have conversations with your neighbors. Know who your legislator is. Who's your senator in your district? Who's your legislator in your district? Start having conversations with them. And like I said, we would be more than happy to, come to your church, come to your school, come to a coffee shop if you want to get a couple friends together because you have some questions. But start asking questions and stop just listening to, like, for example, this forum and the stuff that they put out. Question everything. And then go truly seek answers.
You want people to exercise critical thinking skills? Is that what you're saying?
It'd be good.
Well, I have all the confidence in anybody who's over 40 has that capability, and I have even more confidence in our young people to be able to do that. But that requires us to get control of our education system, and that's where it starts.
I have met some outstanding young people in the recent weeks. In the last month, I went to the Capitol for an event, and one of the gals that spoke, I think she was probably early 20s, blew me away about how engaged they're becoming or how engaged they are. So I think there's a change coming. There's something happening right now with young people, and they're starting to get involved and starting to see. I 100% so, it's that the millennials, I guess. Is that group?
I lost track of them all.
Gen Zers.
All the Gen. I don't know the Gen Z.
Alpha. Yeah.
Gen Alpha, Gen Beta. What is my son is? He keeps telling me he's Gen. Is it Gen Alpha or?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. That's why I say I 100% believe that our young people are incredibly resilient and have the capability. If anybody has the capability, it's our young people in truly digging into the history and like in light of what happened with Charlie Kirk and that assassination, the number of young people just absolutely brilliant, and they're our future, and I definitely there's hope.
There's two things. So I have a little experience in the judiciary and fighting the judiciary, trying to set some things straight. But it costs a lot of money to do what you're doing right now. How do people help? Is there a place that people can donate? How do we get people to help you out financially? Because bottom line, it costs money to get things done. So how do we get money to you?
It does, yeah. And as Barbara knows, and we pay our own way. When we, a couple of years ago, we were running all over the state of Montana having community forums, and I believe we're going to be discussing this at our board meeting about resuming that next summer. Because what we would do would go to like Missoula, Bozeman, Billings, Kalispell, the bigger areas, and have a legislative roundtable early in the day. Usually it's like on a Saturday. The legislative roundtable would be early in the day where we would just invite the local legislators to a roundtable meeting, and they'd come and visit with us, and we'd say, here's what we're looking at bringing in the next session as far as bills. This is what it's about, etc. And then in the evenings, we'd have community forums, and we'd invite the community to come in. And sometimes we had crowds of 40, 50 people sometimes. Bozeman's another one. Surprisingly, Bozeman was one of our biggest crowds down there. So Billings, we had at the legislative roundtable, we had, I think, probably 20 over 20 senators and representatives come to our forum down there about 3 years ago. So they're very engaged. The community forum we had, I don't know, maybe 20 of them at that. But I know personally I've spent a lot of my own money doing this between, gas, motels. I really don't include meals because you got to eat anyway. But it's a big expense, and just the operating expenses of Montana Scotia costs a lot of money. So, yeah, we do accept donations. Right now we're making a big push for donations on this complaint that we're going to be filing in U.S. District Court through the cascade effect. So actually right now we're kind of revamping our website, and the donation button isn't working right now, so we're going to get that up and going again, but I appreciate that. So people...
The P.O. Box.
Oh, the P.O. Box is P.O. Box 196, Black Eagle, Montana, 59414.
And then within the next month, we're going through a revamp of the website. So there will be a donate button on the website where they can just do it straight through the website, which I know for our generation and the youngers, that's that we like convenience. But so we're working on getting that. So we'll get that posted. We also have a Facebook page, and we'll put posts out there and let people know when that donate button is back up and going.
And then my second, to wrap things up, is speaking of young people, I have some young people that are doing podcasts out of here.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Would you come back and have discussions with them about grand juries or anything else that you're trying to get done, and sit around our little table here and maybe we'll get those people under 30.
Yeah, I would love to. I am all about learning and growing, and I'm trying to do that myself personally. And then, and what good does learning if we're not sharing it, right? So I would love that.
Yeah, and I wish I would have brought those books on the grand jury. I could have, held them up and showed them. But here's the books that people can order to start reading. The first one is the basic one. I think Barbara touched on it. Was Grand Jury Awake. It's written by author David Zuniga, and you can get that on Amazon for, I think it's $10. It's not much. It's paperback, but it's a very good basic read. There's also what's known as the People's Panel, which was written about 60 or 70 years ago. It's a very detailed book on the history of grand jury up to where it is now. And then the most recent book that I just got, and I was pretty excited, I'm about a third the way through it already, is called The Hidden Fourth Branch. It's a pretty thick book, but it's large print for us older folk. It's a really good read. I'm really enjoying that. So there's a wealth of information out there if you want to learn about what state grand jury is. So,
and everybody can find all this information on your website.
You can find the information at mtscoja.org. There's grand jury information on there. info@mtscoja.org is the email to reach us. And then we're in addition to the donate button, we're going to be putting a Google number where people can call us directly.